Insight into the significance of vanquishing the Islamic State group and a look at where it stands now.
Challenged with eradicating post-harvest losses and food preservation for farmers in southwest Nigeria, the rehabilitated Agric Institute reopens.
Keeping up with climate change and improving food security. A look at how technology in Kenya is helping farmers store and distribute excess produce to the hungry.
Hello, thanks for tuning into the show that goes around the continent to bring you stories near and far. I'm Chamberlain Osoa, Channels Television here in Lagos. I'm joined by Vincent Makori from Voice of America in Washington.
Thanks, I'm Vincent Makori at the Voice of America. Happy to be with you again for another edition of Africa 54. Let's start off with the latest from Nigeria. Chamberlain Osoa in Lagos brings you that story.
The federal government has rehabilitated the Nigerian Stored Products Research Institute, Ibadan, in southwest Nigeria. The institute is saddled with the eradication of post-harvest losses and food preservation for farmers in Osun, Oyo, and Ekiti states.
This rehabilitated structure was built in 1956 to manage post-harvest losses of food crops and scale up food preservation in Nigeria. After being abandoned for many decades, the Nigerian Stored Products Research Institute Administrative Building is now better positioned to achieve its mandate.
Being in a community where there are other research institutes, and both national and international, and having that old look did not augur well for the morale of the staff. But with this new structure, I'm sure that they are happy and they'll be able to go out to put in their best.
The Minister of Agriculture, who is represented at the event by the Executive Secretary of Agricultural Council of Nigeria, is calling on farmers to leverage on the innovation from research institutes.
The farmers present here today must make sure that they access the facilities that are available in all our research institutes. We have about 16 agricultural research institutes that are established to render services. First for genetic improvement, but we have added training arm to them. We have also added extension work. We are also at the verge of allowing them to be distributing input, just like NISRE is doing today. So they must avail themselves of the opportunities that are abound in most of these research institutes, especially with NISRE, because the greater damage is done after you have labored, you have suffered, you have tilled the soil, you have made all forms of input. Then at the end of it, you have a problem. So let them avail themselves of the opportunity that abound.
Some of the farmers who are major stakeholders in industry are calling for better funding for agricultural development.
More money must be voted for agriculture, because if you get agriculture well, you've gotten everything well in the country. You will have solved food insecurity, you have solved the problem of insecurity, you will have solved a lot of things, health, employment. So this is what we are saying. More money must be voted into agriculture so that we can get so many things right.
With at least 16 agricultural institutes spread across the country, collaboration between farmers and researchers at institutes such as this will no doubt improve the nation's food security.
Well, joining us to discuss this is the Chairman, Agric Business Group, Nigerian Association of Chambers of Commerce, Industry, Mines and Agriculture, NASIMA, Mr. Ade Adefeko. Glad to have you join us on Africa 54.
Thank you for having me.
So tell us, do Nigerian farmers actually have access to these research facilities?
Interesting question. I wish I could provide you an answer, but that's in a lighter mood. But seriously speaking, the research institutes have become so moribund. All they do is they arrange trainings to go for capacity building courses abroad, when they should be providing capacity building for farmers in areas of, training for seedlings and the likes. So, you can go on and on from NIFOR to NIHOP. It's a sad story. It's a tragedy, actually.
Oh dear. Well, certainly we hope that will improve. But at the moment, we have about 16 agricultural institutes spread across the country to help prevent post-harvest losses and provide food preservation for farmers. Do you think the Institute is doing enough in this regard?
Well, I will say to a large extent in the last 3, 4, 5 years, with help from some multinational agencies, there has been a bit of a ramp up in terms of funding and support. And this funding and support comes through for the major crops, particularly the cocoa, cashew, sesame, and sometimes cotton and the likes, and of course rice. But what is important is that in the early 60s and 70s, and probably late 80s, Nigerian research institutes were, top-notch. You had a lot of professors from universities coming there to come and offer, come and teach and come and inculcate in research students new programs and new perspectives. But since the 90s and early 2000s, not much is happening anymore. And you find out that there's been a brain drain from the research institutes because what they get in terms of funding is mostly used for, recurrent expenditure, unfortunately. So my suggestion is that a lot of organizations, private sector, should try and support these training institutes to a large extent.
And then eventually what people will expect is that these institutions will impact the Agric sector on a larger scale, especially when it has to do with food security. Do you see that happening?
I see that happening if there's collaboration between private sector practitioners, okay? Private sector practitioners helping to support the food security agenda of government. And I think research institutes should form the bedrock of food security, technology, and the likes.
Okay, so Mr. Defeko, maybe we should just have this one. So if you will give an advice to either the authorities, the regulatory bodies, and the farmers so that they can all work together to ensure food security, what would that be?
What I will say is there should be a nexus, there should be alignment, and there should be partnerships and collaboration. Partnerships and collaboration that works and works for all. Else, we will still be where we are. But I think if we go along those lines, we should be in a good place. Let's put it that way.
All right, then. Thank you very much indeed for your time today.
Thank you for having me, Chamberlain.
Benin has adopted a new law legalizing abortion, in most cases one of the few African countries to do so. A conservative country, the law was passed by Parliament to prevent a wave of clandestine abortions that have resulted in deaths. Kwom Joel Honore has this report from Cotonou.
5 years ago, Francine became pregnant. A student at the time, she was afraid to tell her parent. She asked VOA not to use her real name and protect her identity.
I couldn't tell my parents because I was still in college, and if they learned of my pregnancy, I was going to stop going to school.
She ended up getting a clandestine abortion, but the procedure went badly and she had to be hospitalized.
When we got here, we were taken to the consultation room. I lay down on a table, and when I took off the filling I was wearing, things were coming out of me. They told me it was my intestines.
There has been an increase of clandestine abortions this year as sexual assaults have risen, says the head gynecologist of Aplahwe City Hospital.
I had to manage 3 cases of clandestine abortions. There is one who died, and there are 2 teenagers, 17 and 18 years old, who are alive, but they no longer have their uteruses.
According to Benin's Ministry of Social Affairs, 200 women die each year as a result of complication. This led the government to introduce a law in October authorizing abortion to stop such death.
Avec le constat qui a été fait, we really had to react. We have hundreds of women who died in deplorable conditions because they wanted to try to abort under non-secure conditions.
But Benin's clergy and traditional leaders opposed the law as an attack on life.
La vie de l'homme est quelque chose d'important.
The life of a human being is something important and must be considered. The problem is to know in what conditions the woman got pregnant.
But those who have had complications from clandestine abortions says there should be no debate about saving the life of women.
When we get pregnant and don't want to keep it, we have to be helped. Pregnancy prevents us from going to school.
Benin's government is preparing to launch a public awareness campaign in schools and throughout the country about merit of the abortion law. Kwam Joel Honoré for VOA News, Cotonou, Benin.
Cameroon is hosting the Africa Cup of Nations Tournament soccer finals in 6 cities commencing January 9, and preparations are in top gear. Authorities have kept security plans under wraps with the promise that there will be no disruptions to group matches.
Droves of armored vehicles are patrolling the streets of Limbe in Cameroon's conflict-torn southwest region ahead of the Africa Cup of Nations football finals starting on January the 9th that separatist militants have vowed to disrupt. Cameroon is hosting the tournament in 6 cities, but security is potentially most at threat in Limbe, a city on the tropical Atlantic coast whose surrounding region has been rocked by armed attacks since war broke out in 2017.
My fear and the fear of many Limbe denizens is that the recent phenomenon of bomb blasts, which has been happening in other parts of Fako division, like in Boya, can be a common phenomenon during this AFCON period.
Insecurity is just one issue facing the tournament. Concerns about the readiness of stadiums and the spread of the Omicron COVID-19 variant have also made headlines in recent weeks. But despite the fear, some in Limbe are prepared to welcome, hopefully, many fans in the city.
With such an event, we do believe it will boom our business because so many customers will come from different areas, different towns, different countries. We'll meet so many other people that will meet new friends, make new friends. I'm very happy for the event.
Limbe's Omnisport Stadium will host matches from Group F comprising Tunisia, Mali, Mauritania and Gambia. The group's first game will be between Tunisia and Mali on January the 12th. Armed police, gendarmes and soldiers are already positioned at major intersections. Checkpoints have been set up on roads into the city.
It's time now for a short break, and as we do, we remind you to visit our website, channelstv.com, for news and programming around the clock. You can also find us at youtube.com/channelsweb. Still to come, meet the miracle coach of Morocco. With physical challenges of his own, he consistently inspires other players to excel on the field.
Welcome back to Africa 54. I'm Vincent McCory in Washington. It has been 4 years since then Iraqi Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi declared the military defeat of the Islamic State group in Iraq. More than a year later, in March 2019, the capture of Baghouz in Syria marked the group's total territory defeat. VOA Pentagon correspondent Carla Babb explains the significance of the terror group's vanquishing and where it stands now.
Islamic State in Iraq and Syria once controlled more than 7 million people and 100,000 kilometers of land. Since its territorial defeat, it could no longer wage a full-scale war, but the group, also known as ISIS, has not stopped terrorizing local populations through bombings and small attacks.
ISIS as an insurgency and terrorist organization has not been defeated. They are geared to wage a long war, a long jihad.
Tom Jocelyn of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies says there is also evidence of Islamic State in Iraq and Syria commanding more active ISIS affiliates in areas of Africa and in Afghanistan, where the United Nations now says the group has spread to every province within the war-torn country.
I think that overall the U.S. has pretty consistently underestimated the jihadi cause. The U.S. has, for a very long time, has played what I call disconnect the dots. The political and military leadership and others really have not wanted to be in this fight for a long time. And so they see the enemy the way they want to see it.
Former President Barack Obama once infamously called Islamic State in Iraq and Syria the, quote, JV or junior varsity team, only to later send thousands of troops to help counter them. And former President Donald Trump twice tried to pull all forces out of Syria, only to send troops back in to continue helping Syrian allies battling the terror group. The international coalition's role fighting Islamic State in Iraq and Syria has shrunk over time, as have U.S. troop numbers.
Today, that mission has been scaled down a lot. The number of U.S. troops has been reduced by over 66% in the past 24 months.
The roughly 2,500 troops in Iraq are sharing intelligence and helping the Iraqi forces and the Kurdish forces known as the Peshmerga with operational planning. About 1,000 U.S. troops in Syria are helping the Syrian Democratic Forces find remnants of Islamic State while securing critical infrastructure. Colonel Miles Kaggans, a military fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations who served as the spokesman for the global coalition to defeat ISIS, says where U.S. forces are partnered in Syria, the terror group is unable to hold territory or conduct significant attacks.
In contrast, in regime-held areas, there are still pockets of resistance and terrorist activity from ISIS that is giving fits to the Syrian regime in the Badia Desert. So this is a sign that our continued presence, our continued partnership at a very small scale, we're talking just several hundred troops, is paying off dividends globally.
One of the most worrisome problems lingering since Islamic State's territorial defeat is the massive number of fighters and family members detained in overcrowded prison camps.
ISIS is now a so-called caliphate that's in a cage. More than 10,000 ISIS fighters, members, are locked up and held by Syrian Democratic Forces in North and East Syria.
With detainees in Syria hailing from more than 60 different nations, local Syrian fighters are looking to Iraq and the global community to take in some of them before the camps become an even bigger breeding ground for the next generation of insurgents. Carla Babb, VOA News, The Pentagon.
A young, physically challenged Moroccan, Abdelkhalik El Oudri, is living his dream as a soccer coach. Dubbed the Miracle Coach, Abdelkhalik El Oudri trains other players to excel on the playing field. He started his coaching career in 2010 with neighborhood teams and has since gained significant experience over time, participating in local and regional tournaments.
Despite being born without limbs, Abdelkhalik El Oudri's determination and love for soccer has taken him all the way to coaching a Moroccan youth team.
I started my career in coaching in 2010 with local neighborhood teams. From 2010 until 2014, I gained significant coaching experience and I participated in local and regional tournaments. Thank God, last year I was assigned to supervise the under-15 group from the team.
At the age of 7, El Oudri used to play soccer with other children in his village, mostly a goalkeeper. But as he got older, he instead began observing how the other children played and gave them feedback on their technique.
Out of the field, Abdelkhalik has a kind and pure heart, a person with high morals. On the field, he's the same, but he's also more strict with me as an assistant and the players. He does not like chaos or any negativity.
El Oudri hopes to move on to coaching higher level championships, but needs qualifications in order to do so. His colleague Wafe Tara praises the coach's ability to cultivate talent on the soccer field.
I hope that the Royal Moroccan Football Federation will help people with disabilities obtain diplomas in training and sports management. I bear witness that Coach Abdelkhalik works with youth and he is strict in training and he does not like chaos during training. He's also great at spotting talent, which enriches local teams in Ben Gurion.
Dubbed the miracle coach by his colleagues and supporters, supporters, El Kadi is known for being firm but fair on the playing field.
While some farmers and organizations in Africa are adopting smart and technology-based solutions as the continent seeks to prepare itself for the effects of climate change. In Kenya, one group has invested in cold storage facilities to ensure that excess agricultural produce that would have otherwise become gas-producing waste is collected, stored, and distributed to those in need, including victims of drought. Brenda Mulinya reports from Nairobi.
For close to 5 years, Food Bank in Kenya has been helping people like Lillian Vihenda feed their families. In the current hard economic times in Kenya, Lillian says these care packages from the non-profit group help keep her children in school.
The money that I would have used to buy food that I now get from the food bank, I use it to pay for my children's school fees, which is a great help.
The organization salvages abandoned excess food from farms and markets and stores it for distribution to the needy and vulnerable. The food bank's mission to eradicate hunger and tackle food waste has also morphed into a campaign to stop the harmful impact of climate change. John Gadhungu, the non-profit's head, says the recent acquisition of a cold storage facility is enabling the food bank to store more and reduce greenhouse emissions from the farms.
When food in the farms ends up in the landfills, you find that there is a lot of toxicity within the air, because what happens is that when they rot in the landfill, they produce methane, which is a worse product than carbon dioxide. And if we curb food wastage, we can be able at least to reduce the amount of of gas that is produced from at least 6 to 8%.
Smart agriculture and technological advances will be key to helping Africa adapt and mitigate climate change impacts, says analyst Winnie Haimba.
Agricultural technologies that also ensure that you have reduced emissions, CO2 emissions, carbon dioxide emissions, methane emissions, and so on, which are all greenhouse gases, are really, really important. So I need of these technologies, and then also the capacity to be able to apply these technologies.
But technology requires funding, and that remains a challenge. Experts say the continent will need more than $300 billion over the next decade as it develops strategies that will help cushion it from the effects of climate change. Brenda Mulinya for VOA News, Nairobi.
Well, and that's our show for today. You can find all the continent's top news and world news online at voaafrica.com. Check it out. I'm Vincent McCory in Washington. Channels Television has our last word from Lagos.
We look forward to bringing you another show next week. ChannelsTV.com is your source for news and other programming. I'm Chain Balinuso. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.